Hey, folks, look how professional I am. We're starting the show. I don't even have the mic in the right place. God damn it. Hey, everybody, how you doing? Welcome. Thanks for being here. I, wi- I, I don't know how to introduce this. I found the best analogy for what we're going through as a human race, like, but also specifically maybe more America, but all it seems to be happening all around. But this is what we're doing. This is how it looks. This is what it is. I gotta show this video. Uh to me, this is just exactly what we are. And for those of you listening at home, you won't understand this. Hopefully I'll get my shit together and I'll cut this part out of the podcast because it's all visual, so it won't make any sense to you. But all right, this is a real bike race, by the way. This is not something that they made up, but this is an analogy for everything we're going through. This is us continually just destroy the planet with climate change, and then let's just keep doing it. Just keep going. We're just giant, massive, big oil spills. We'll just keep doing that the way we have been. Giant collapses like the 2008 economic collapse. Tens of millions lose their homes. Let's just keep the system going exactly as it is. We'll just do that again. Just keep going that way. Just keep going down that path. That looks good. Yeah, we'll just keep doing that. Corporations just gutting communities and then leaving and shipping the jobs overseas. We'll just keep doing that. Just what? It seems fine to me. Seems fine. Just a whole species of animals going extinct, and we're let's just keep going down that path. That seems fine. This is gonna work. I mean, if you're one of these riders, what are you thinking driving into this? You thinking you're coming out the other side? This is gonna work great. Yeah, we'll just go down this way. Honestly, does a single one of these guys think that it's gonna work? They just keep going. No. Well, giant catastrophic wars that the U.S. gets involved in overseas, just over and over again. Hey, let's just keep doing it. Let's just do that again. Here we go. Let's try that path where we just fund and arm terrorists or Nazis in other countries. That never comes back to haunt us. That never collapses in the end in a catastrophic, disgusting failure. That'll be working fine. Let's just capitalism where the inequality is egregious and just sucks all the wealth to the top. No, we'll just keep going down that path. It seems fine. Seems to be working well for us. Here we go. Yeah, let's head on down. Head on down the path. Oh, whoops. Oh no, that didn't. Okay, that didn't go great. But you know what? I'm just gonna get back on this bike and I'm gonna keep going. I didn't. Oh, all the big banks just stole fucking trillions of dollars. Let's just keep headed down. We'll just go down that path again. Let's keep it going. To me, this is everything we do. If you're right now, it's nothing but 1,000 wrecks. And if you're one of these guys at the top, are you thinking it's gonna go well? Are you thinking, no problem here? I'll just head on down on my bicycle, and I'll just ride down through this path. There we go. All right. Well, I had to show that video. That is a real race in the Alps in France. And it's and where they just ride down. It starts on a glacier and they just all fucking fall on top of each other. And half of them probably tear their ACLs. And they just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. And to me, that's what we are. That's what we do. And I have a great guest coming on the show today, Rory Verrado, who works with Extinction Rebellion. So he's going to talk about our environmental collapse, what's going on there, and we're going to get to him in a minute. But I just thought this was the perfect analogy for where we stand, for our game plan, for how things have been working. And for what the Democrats and Republicans in the United States, what they tell us they're going to do. I'm just going to Keep doing the same shit storm. Just destroying everyone's lives. Seems fine. Keep going. And actually, the legitimate, if you saw my recent episode of Most Censored News, the actual motto of the new third party founded by Yang and a couple of Republicans is not left, not right, forward. That's what those bicyclists are doing. Bicyclists are doing. It's not left, not right, forward. We're just going forward. But anyway, thank you for joining me. I got a bunch of great stories for you as well on today's episode. And if you could please click the subscribe button at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Because that's, whether you watch it there regularly, whether you care that you're subscribing, it's free to subscribe, whether you care anything, just do that because it helps the algorithm. It helps everything. So click the thumbs up, click the plus Rumble, whatever the fuck, I don't know. But do that and it'll really help the show. But since I'm bringing on a climate activist here in a few minutes, I thought I'd start off with this story. And this is, I saw this under a tweet. I don't remember who tweeted it, but someone wrote, "Not all heroes wear capes." And it's a great tweet to go with this story. Climate activists. Oh, this is also in France. Wow, what a theme. All right, the theme is the French. But anyway, this has to do with climate activists, though. Climate activists in France have filled golf course holes with cement to protest against the exemption of golf greens from water bans amid the country's severe drought. And this image is tough to see what it is, but that's a golf hole on a golf green, and it's been filled in with fucking cement. And I just love this. It's just such a beautiful, small thing that we can all do to just fuck with the ruling class, to just fuck with the rich who use, if people haven't seen George Carlin's bit on golfing, just go watch that after the show's over. Because he talks about how fucking elitist it is and how much land is used, massive green space that has to be watered all the time. I heard a great podcast on how one of the main, like, most prestigious golf courses in Los Angeles or around Los Angeles, it has a tax exemption, or maybe all the golf courses do, but that one specifically, tax exemption on property taxes, because golf course property taxes around Los Angeles would be fucking insane. So one of the richest golf courses in Los Angeles gets out of paying property taxes while everyone else does. And here's the thing, even if you hate property taxes, you don't think that should be a thing, that still doesn't mean you should think that the rich should get out of them and no one else should. But anyway, these activists, they went in there, I'm assuming at night. The group targeted sites near the city of Toulouse, which I'm sure is not how you pronounce that, because the French never pronounce all the letters. You have to leave out like 4 letters. The group targeted sites, calling golf the leisure industry of the most privileged. The exemption of golf greens has sparked controversy as 100 French villages are short of drinking water. So, and this is what we mean in, like, when we talk about global climate crisis. This is not just the United States. It's not just areas of India that are like 120 degrees every day. It's worldwide. Areas of France don't have drinking water. This is a worldwide issue, and we should be dealing with it as a world. And instead, you have our so-called leaders fucking, doing nothing. Biden, as I covered on a recent Most Censored News as well, Biden has given $800 billion, whatever, to the military, and $2 billion in his latest bill for climate change, to do anything about climate change. 2 compared to 800. Anyway, let's see. A golf course without a green is like an ice rink without ice. One of them quoted. He added that 15,000 people worked in golf courses across the country. The recent action targeted courses in certain towns. In a petition, activists said the exemption showed that economic madness takes precedence over ecological reason. While residents cannot water their gardens or wash their cars in the worst hit municipalities, golf courses have escaped the nationwide restrictions. And here's the thing: is like these are the type of things that like interrupt business as usual, that get attention in the media, that are not allowed by the ruling elite. And I'm not going to act like this is the biggest action ever. You know, it's not like they burned down a big oil plant or something, but it's these type of things that are small things that, like, you know, a lot of people could be involved in. And I think we're getting to a point where it's like, what the fuck do we have to lose? The planet's frying. You're going to get upset we filled in a couple of golf holes? I mean, fuck it. I hope you do get upset, because it's about time to get upset. Anyway, that was one small action that I thought was hilarious, because, you know, couldn't you? Do you have to have perfect, well sprinkled greenery to play golf? Couldn't you just have a fucking brown course? What's the difference? No, we can't hit a golf ball over a brown course. It's not the same. The ball doesn't fly through the air the same on brown grass. We have to have sparkling green, billions of gallons of fresh water grass in order to play that kind of golf. Anyway, so on the same subject of the climate crisis, but we're going to get into a lot of things, I think, depending on how much time we have. But I want to bring on Rory Verrado, sorry. And he's not just with Extinction Rebellion. He also is a PhD candidate in philosophy and education at Columbia. He's an adjunct professor at Fordham. He studied U.S. history and political theory. So got a lot of areas that he's studied on. I got a lot of areas of interest. I don't know if I don't kind of studied. I just have interest. I did get a degree, but I've never fucking used it for a second. I knew while I was studying, I was like, they're going to give me a piece of paper at the end of this that I will never show to anyone, because no one in the comedy biz cares whether you have a diploma. But anyway, let's bring on Rory. Hello.
Hey, Lee, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing pretty well, man, all things considered.
So yeah, I just want to plug these in. So yeah, I wanted to bring you on to talk about the climate crisis. You do work with Extinction Rebellion, correct?
Yes.
And you know, I was just talking about those climate activists that filled in the golf course holes.
Oh, right.
Did you see that one?
I did. Yes, I didn't read into it fully, but I saw the headlines and the photos, and I enjoyed that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the deeper details is that the areas of France are having severe drought and people are not allowed to water their lawns, but golf courses get an exemption.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's the similar in Arizona. I lived in Arizona for 10 years, and they're dealing with massive drought as well. But the golf courses in Scottsdale, they stay watered.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to watch people get around the slightest. I mean, we hardly have any climate regulations in place at all, and yet the ruling class, the upper class, gets around them anyway.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there was that recent Supreme Court ruling that came down, right? West Virginia versus EPA, that basically forbid the EPA from regulating carbon emissions, certainly anything close to a carbon tax. So yeah, it's a fucking joke, man.
Someone very informed in the chat just said there is no climate crisis. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that person is either propagandized or propagandizing, or maybe probably a little bit of both. It's just laughable. You know, the effect, the greenhouse effect was discovered over 100 years ago, articulated in scientific papers over the course of the 20th century. We know for a fact that this is occurring, and anyone who's been alive, I think, and paying attention just with your own eyes and ears over the last decade and is honest with themselves, has noticed the exponential increase in the severity of climate related crises. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing. And I was saying this years ago. I mean, you just open your eyes and you could see it, but I was like, how long can the right, and at the time, most of the propaganda was coming from the right wing, but we now know the Democrats aren't doing anything to change anything either. But
Right.
but I was like, how long can these, right wing talk shows on radio and stuff say that tell people there's no climate crisis or anything as people are waist deep in floods, as their crops are dying? I was driving through the time where it really struck me was, this is back when I would tour colleges with stand-up comedy. I'm in Ohio, kind of the middle of nowhere. And I'm driving through an area where whole farmlands, the houses, everything flooded. It's just, it's up to the, second stories and everything. But the road was high enough that it was still passable. So I'm on this road just looking at flooding all around me. And literally I flipped the radio and the guy goes, we can win this. We can win this and get people to realize that this environmentalism is just a grab for control. And there is no climate issue. And it was like, how do people listen to that while they're floating on their furniture?
Yes. Yeah. The cognitive dissonance is astonishing. And like the sort of the psychological bases for political ideologies, I find extremely interesting, because it's not unique to the climate issue that conservatives, and here I would include mainstream, liberals, Democrats as well. It's not just that issue that they are sort of believing misinformation or acting against their own self-interest, even to that extent that you just described, right? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is it's a holistic problem to get people to believe what they see and what they experience rather than what they're told. I haven't quite been able to figure out how to solve that problem. For me, it's through education and cultivating critical thinking faculties. But I don't know, that's too slow of a process in the face of rapidly accelerating ecological catastrophe in particular, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of manipulation, I've done more than one segment on how, a lot of people know that the big oil companies knew about climate change, and they actually could fairly accurately predict the amount of change that was coming. Maybe under predicted to some level, but they were close. And like I knew that happened in the 80s and early 90s, but the earliest discussion of this was at the 1959 American Petroleum Institute conference. And then there were more studies done through the 60s and 70s, all of them saying this is what would happen. And it's like amazing how long they've known about this.
Yes, it's horrifying, really, especially because, as you just pointed out, the people who have known most clearly about it and most thoroughly were the ones conducting these activities, right? So they're, it's premeditated ecocide, essentially. It's not just accidental. And so these people, agency or responsibility is not evenly distributed. This is, I think, a key issue that Extinction Rebellion and other groups will have to address, right? And are trying to address, which is that we face an existential threat collectively as a species, right? It's a global problem that impacts and affects us all. But of course, the people responsible for it are a minority, or disproportionately a small group of elites, including heads of state, politicians, corporate executives, etc. So how do we sort of solve that political problem of grabbing these people by the throat who are killing us and pointing out to them that they're going to die as well? In other words, they're not just killing others, they're killing themselves. That's one of the things that astonishes me. Do they not care about their children, grandchildren, etc.? Or they just think they can live on a yacht forever?
I think there's a fair number of them that honestly think their money protects them. I mean, I know of, or maybe even have met a few people who are not, they're not the billionaires, but they're rich enough that they think, well, we can, when the fires come, we'll buy, we can buy another house. We can pay people to move our shit out of the way. Like,
right.
I think they honestly believe that it's the money will protect them. But part of creating this change, part of the reason creating this change is so difficult, has been so difficult, is because we live in this inverted totalitarian structure.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little about that, the structure in which we live in the United States, these two-party system that is really one party.
Absolutely. I had so inverted totalitarianism, I guess I can just give a basic overview for people who might not know. Inverted totalitarianism is a political theory put forth by the United States' preeminent political theorist of the 20th century and into the 21st century, a guy by the name of Sheldon Wolin, who inspired and influenced countless people, including myself, Cornel West, and many others. So I encourage all of you watching and listening to check out his work. But his last major book, which came out, I think, shortly after Obama was inaugurated in 2008, was titled Democracy Incorporated, The Specter of Managed Democracy and Inverted Totalitarianism. And in that, long and dense book, he articulates or explains his vision of what he calls inverted totalitarianism. It's sort of a mouthful of a name, but it's almost self-explanatory. In Wolin's view, the United States, basically from the beginning of the neoliberal era, 1975, to the present, but especially, in his opinion, after 2001 and the emergence of the War on Terror, which he thought fundamentally changed the nature of the American polity. He felt that the United States had become a totalitarian system that in some meaningful sense was opposite to, in many ways, what he called the traditional totalitarian systems, namely Nazi Germany and others. So one example would be that under those traditional totalitarian systems, the government dominates corporations, right? Seizes control of them and uses them as appendages for its own purposes. The Nazi war effort, for example. Under inverted totalitarianism, which is the contemporary American system, according to Wolin, the opposite has occurred. Corporations have seized control of the government, right?
Yeah.
Which is why some people describe inverted totalitarianism as a corporatocracy. I think Chris Hedges uses that word. And so that's one example. And part of the sort of stealthy evil of the inverted totalitarianism, in Wolin's view, is that it retains the formal structures and the superficial appearance of, representative democracy in the case of the United States. But in fact, it's parasitic on those structures, and it sort of is puppeteering them from within, so that we have corporate candidates running corporate campaigns.
I like puppeteering because it is democracy theater, really.
Yeah, for sure. It is. And we have these corporate candidates running corporate campaigns using corporate cash to be elected by quote unquote citizens to serve corporate interests, right? So it's theatrical in the way you just described. And that's why, in my view, and, we can get into this more if you like. I think it's similar probably to your perspective too, but there's a classic kind of division among emphases within leftism broadly, reform versus revolution. In my view, and I think Wolin's view and many others, there's no reforming inverted totalitarianism. It's a revolution or destruction.
Yeah. I think that holds true. I think that maybe there's no segue to this, but I think it would probably fit in with that discussion.
Sure.
And I am certain I'm not the first to think about this, but I just haven't seen at least enough people bringing it up, that the United States, the U.S. empire, gets a large amount of our power and wealth from the fact that we have the petrodollar. The agreement with Saudi Arabia and OPEC that oil will be sold in dollars then makes dollars sought after, which makes them worth a lot, and also means that the United States can print as much as we want of this sought after currency. So the U.S. empire, a lot of it is based on the petrodollar, meaning isn't there like just a massive reason for the U.S. empire to stop a switch away from petroleum at all costs? Like,
Yes.
could we see a cessation of the use of fossil fuels while America is still relying on the petrodollar for our empire?
Yeah, absolutely not, in my opinion. And I'm glad you bring this up because there are so many reasons to focus on and connect imperialism with fossil fuel extraction. So as George Carlin supposedly said, I've been looking for the source for this quote forever. Maybe you know the source, but he supposedly said at one point, the United States is an oil company with the military. And
Yeah,
I think
I've noticed people attributing that to Carlin. I don't remember Carlin saying that phrase, but maybe.
I can't find the source either, but I like it. It's just a pithy sort of encapsulation of this nexus, right, between imperialism and the extraction of fossil fuels. And I think, when you see studies that show that the United States military, for example, is I think the 43rd largest emitter of carbon when ranked in comparison to nation states. So out of all nation states, the military, U.S. military is like 40th or something like this. There's though the goal of decarbonization and imperialism are incompatible, right? But then you also have this bizarre sort of performative contradiction with, if you recall, Elizabeth Warren, I think in the last primary cycle was talking about greening the military, right? Where we're going to switch to solar powered tanks and all this shit. And
I think, didn't they just have some nuclear powered, it might not have been the US, it might have been another country, just unveiled some nuclear powered either ship or submarine or something. And their big sales pitch was, we have a green battleship.
Right. Yes, exactly. And we have a diverse crew as well, because.
Well, and then, then there was the one it was just the ship, just like, named or whatever. The latest battleship, the U.S. battleship, was named after a trans activist or something like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And of course, the classic memes of putting rainbow flags on the bombs and everything like that.
Right.
But yeah, it just shows that beneath any, and this really it should be an indictment and dissolution of like liberal identity politics, but somehow these people compartmentalize and ignore these contradictions. But yeah, I mean, there's an interesting point also to be made. So you mentioned like sort of it's like impossible for imperialism in its current form to persist while also pursuing the reduction or elimination of carbon emissions. And so we know that that's true. So what's going to unfold in the face of that? Will the military switch to solar powered tanks for real, or will it sort of simply collapse and fall apart? And I would posit probably a little bit of both, but more so the latter. But the Department of Defense, the CIA, they know about these things. They've recognized climate change as a global and national security threat that poses serious obstacles to their continued operations around the world. And yet at the same time, the military is the instrument by which the economic system is supported, the petrodollar, as you pointed out. As Smedley Butler said 100 years ago, he was a gangster for capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this at some point this is going to come to a head is what I'm trying to get at here. And I'm not sure which direction that will unfold, but this talk, for example, with the Ukraine conflict, the cavalier nature of the discussion regarding nuclear weapons, to me, indicates a sort of chaotic turn in the imperialist system that is really, really distressing.
Yeah, and countries like Sweden joining NATO when they have long refused to do that and said they would remain neutral, and that brings up the question: are they willing to support nuclear weapons in a way that they had always said they wouldn't? Even though Sweden is a huge exporter of weapons, but just not nuclear weapons. But all these things are worrisome. I think you call yourself an activist. What type of activism do you feel is most important right now, or what can people do if they can't, if they don't have the time right now because they work like 2 jobs or something, they don't have the time right now to stop all use of the petrodollar.
Right. Right.
If that's not on their list.
Right. And in fact, they have to use those petrodollars to fill their gas tanks to get to their job where they're underpaid and don't receive health care, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So what can the ordinary person do? I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. First of all, yes, like I consider myself to be a scholar activist, and I'm inspired by Wolin on this point. He described himself, he said that, he was a political theorist. He said that political theory is primarily a civic and secondarily an academic activity. In other words, his intellectual work was geared towards producing change in society, which unfortunately, having been on the inside now as a PhD student at Columbia for several years, I see that is very much the exception. At least.
Yeah, there's a few great ones like Howard Zinn and Noam
Exactly.
Chomsky, but there's not a lot. Yeah.
Yes, and those people are either dead or extraordinarily old, right? There's no real sort of vanguard new generation coming up within academia, and there's a number of reasons for that. But at any rate, so I try to simply live my life in accordance with my principles, recognizing that I too have an Amazon Prime membership. I too am complicit in this fucked up system.
I've fought the Prime membership, but I have ordered things on Amazon, so I don't act like I don't have to at times pay into that. I just, something about the Prime, something about that makes it's just, yeah.
It's disgusting. No, I agree. And I mean, pick your poison, whether it's flying in airplanes or ordering from Amazon or whatever it might be. We're all complicit and it's inescapable. But I do still have some hope. I don't know.
I used to, and just to have one more comment on that. Sure. I used to talk about how you shouldn't expect, if you want to see some kind of change, you shouldn't expect the people that are trying to bring it or talk about it to not live in the system in which we are currently exist. Like the person who is climate and carbon footprint pristine, they might be out there, but they're living in the woods in a fort they built with a hatchet, and you're never going to hear a word they say. Right. So they're not going to create a lot of change. Like, you should want the people existing in a society that needs to be changed to also be the ones trying to create the change.
Exactly. Yes, for sure. You necessarily, I think, have to have one foot within the system that you were born into and that pre-existed your birth, and is so much larger and more powerful than you. And then one foot forward to try and move towards a future that you're working to create. So I think, the hermit in the woods or whatever is not, while it is admirable in some ways, is not the path forward, but neither is this very sort of superficial, performative, and what I would characterize as collaborationist political reformism with establishment parties, especially the Democrats, who, I mean, truthfully, you have to be either a moron or complicit to believe that the Democrats are going to implement meaningful change on this issue. So what can we do? We can try to make small changes in our own individual lives, but I think also like speaking openly and honestly about these issues with everyone you meet, your neighbors, your fellow people, your coworkers, etc., in public, on platforms like this, just everywhere. And this is indeed Extinction Rebellion's first demand. We have a few demands in the movement. And it's to tell the truth. Truth can be galvanizing, right? When people openly admit and recognize and feel like, oh, I'm not alone in realizing this. I'm not alone in understanding that not only is my government unresponsive to my needs, it's actually exacerbating my problems. It's the source of my problems. This, I think, is the sort of germ or the seed of revolutionary sentiment, which I think is quite frankly, it's bubbling up generationally, if nothing else. I teach freshman students in college, and I've noticed a significant change just in the past few years. Basically, I would peg it honestly to Trump's candidacy and the transformation of the political discourse that attended his presidency in some ways, which pushed these students towards more radical. Yeah.
Explain that a little more. Are you saying that he radicalized people against, with a billionaire class that is exploiting us? Or are you saying that because he talks like a moron so openly about all this stuff that people are talking more openly about all this stuff?
Yes, I think it's a little bit of both, but here I'm focusing mainly on sort of your second point about the nature of the discourse itself. I think, sort of both above and beneath the politics themselves, the figure of Trump is a malignant, narcissistic personality. He's the most abusive. He's like every abusive persona smashed into one and brought to the front. Not that other politicians aren't, but many of them hit it better, right? And so his speaking publicly in such a way, such a crass way, such a cruel way, I think struck especially young people. Even like my 7-year-old nephew was just recoils at that. And I think it resulted in an indictment of the system. Like, how could this fucking guy be in charge?
Yeah. And, the actions going on in the machinery of the U.S. empire stayed essentially the same under Trump, Obama, Biden.
Yes.
But what you're seeing right now, and you can agree or disagree, I think you'll agree, but there is a rift in the ruling class that doesn't want Trump to be the CEO of America Inc. because he accidentally or whatever, due to ego or whatever, reveals the entire system. The veneer comes off and everybody goes, oh my God, that's horrifying. And so the ruling class, there's a large chunk of them that are trying to do everything they can to stop him from running this next time. And they're doing things like raiding his Mar-a-Lago and things like that. And, people are like, oh, the FBI is being used as a weapon. The FBI has been used as a weapon forever. It's like, that's what it is.
It's our secret police. Like, come on.
It's a weapon of the ruling class. But this is a war going on in the ruling class. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think that this is, Trump and right-wingers across America against liberals and left-wingers across America. But the underlying, I don't know, but tempest in a teacup right there is them trying to stop the man who reveals the empire from being at the top of it again.
For sure. I think that's very cogent analysis. And I think, we can visualize it almost like an iceberg with layers, right? The political system, the political discourse. And there's this, there is, I think, as you say, this internal conflict within the ruling class. But they are supported, and especially on the sort of conservative neo-fascist side, by folks underneath them, the sort of Trump base, who are they're not necessarily thinking or acting on the same reasons as those they support, right? So in other words, they may be motivated or inspired by other social issues or even prejudices like racism or whatever, xenophobia. They're manipulated by the demagogue, Trump himself. This is true on both sides, I would argue. But it's just it's disconcerting, and it makes this type of analysis, especially when we're trying to think about what to do to combat this sort of decay, it makes it very difficult to speak about publicly. Because if you start criticizing Trump or if you start criticizing Biden or whomever, these figureheads, people become polarized based on issues that are really irrelevant, I think, to the real struggle.
Yeah, I think this does not help with the number of clicks or viewers I get, but I have said kind of continually that, yes, I will mention things Biden does here or there, and, I will mention what a politician does here or there, but I think of your time in your life that you spend talking about politics or cultural issues or things that need to change, the discussion of what a Democrat or Republican did or is doing, it should be like 5% of your discussion. It should be a tiny little fraction, because the Congress, the government, the presidency, it has been captured by the corporate state. And every moment we spend bickering over, but Biden said this, or AOC said that, or Ted Cruz said this, is in like 90% of the time is just wasted airspace.
Yes, and not only that, Lee, I think it's even worse. It's even worse because not only is it a waste, but it's actually exactly what the system wants. It's a mechanism of control because, as Wolin talks about when he describes inverted totalitarianism, the system preserves the veneer of democracy through formal practices and institutions like elections, voting, and so all the political conflict, the whole spectrum is narrowed and funneled into partisan disputes and elections involving candidates from two different parties that are actually a uniparty, that have very subtle social differences or whatever, meaningful. I don't want to dismiss them entirely. Of course, Republicans are anti-gay rights, for example, or whatever, but there are still some small meaningful differences between the parties.
But even on that,
yes,
it was the Supreme Court that legalized gay marriage, and
Obama didn't support it.
Yeah, people act like it was Obama that got through gay marriage. But you're right. Though.
But you know what I mean? Just little shades of difference is all I'm getting at. But nevertheless, the system presents them as like two totally different and opposing sides or factions when in fact they're unified. And so, there's this old quote from Lenin, which I'm going to paraphrase. He says something like, freedom in capitalist society is similar to freedom in ancient Greek society. It's freedom for the slave masters only. And, we live in a country that it's literally, I make this point in my classes all the time because people don't emphasize it enough when you're talking about American history, but this country was literally constitutionally founded on slavery, institutionalized, codified, legalized slavery. It's written into the Constitution. So, we live within an oppressive society that we have had to systematically, everything that we conceptualize as progress in our American history, I would characterize as deconstruction of an oppressive system. And we're not done yet.
I think they're reconstructing it.
Yeah. For sure. It's worse. It's worse.
Well, something else you should mention to your students is that when they wrote the line, all men are created equal, I believe the estimate is that accounted for 6% of the population was white landowning males. So
yes.
The all men was created equal was 6% they were speaking to.
Yes, all white, wealthy aristocrats, many of whom owned slaves. George Washington was the largest landowner, I think, in the colonies at the time of the Revolution. So this
and the 10th, and I only learned this recently, the 10th richest American at the time.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that he was that high up, but I'm not surprised at all. It's a country by and for wealthy colonizers and invaders. And we're dealing with the legacy of that, and at the same time, so like we have this rot within the political system and this incredible obstacle towards actually creating or facilitating collective action. And at the same time, we're confronted with this existential threat, right? Where we need to actually engage in unprecedented collective action right now.
Yeah.
So that for me is sort of the root of any hope at the sort of the largest systems level for change and transformation, is that we're going to be confronted with this sort of crossroads or choice. And I would say we're already at it, where we recognize that the system we use to conduct collective action has failed and is in fact now inhibiting the collective action that we need to take in the face of literal extinction or quasi-extinction. So are we going to swerve into the wall or away from it? There's a great book by Robert J. Lifton, who's a psychologist and an activist, longtime activist on anti-nuclear weapons proliferation, called The Climate Swerve, where he basically articulates this exact argument that I'm describing. We're racing towards a wall, and we're either going to swerve into it or away from it as a species. So, yeah, when I talk about like speaking truthfully in public, I think that that's important at this level for galvanizing collective action, realizing that we could come together and act in a concerted manner to actually change our world. We don't have to be passive spectators to our own extinction. We can stand up, and actually try to take action through parallel institutions. Fuck this government. It's our enemy. It's not we're not going to take over the Democratic Party. We're not going to do any of that stuff. It's not going to come from within. We need parallel institutions that can replace a failing state.
Do you have parallel institutions or attempts or plans that you see as hopeful? Maybe something like mutual aid that gives you some hope.
Yeah, for sure. Mutual aid groups throughout this city, New York, and around the country are a great example of parallel institutions and prefigurative institutions. But unfortunately, I don't know of anything that is emerging on the national level yet that could serve this purpose. It's one of Extinction Rebellion's goals to create citizens' assemblies, democratic citizens' assemblies, to serve this purpose. I think that's been more successful internationally, especially in the UK, where there's a precedent for citizens' assemblies and where Extinction Rebellion, the movement, began. But I'm thinking also sort of informally at the level of neighborhoods and just people's lived experiences, right? In the sense that, especially when you think of disaster or catastrophe, if there's a disaster, let's say a tornado hits your street or whatever, how do people behave? They sort of just automatically, ideally, I think, but realistically, they sort of automatically come together and begin rendering aid. And that's, I hope, the spontaneous emergence in the face of catastrophe that we'll see. It's a huge problem. It's a coordination problem that I think the internet could help facilitate in theory, right? Because we have decentralized instantaneous communication.
Right.
Unfortunately,
if you didn't have big tech increasingly captured by the same corporate state that is running things and trying to shut down that type of discussion, that type of organization. But
Yes,
well,
that's a tragedy.
I've kept you here far longer than I said I would, but I'd love to have you back regularly. So I really appreciate chatting with you, and thanks for all the info.
Thanks, Lee. Absolutely. I'd love to come back anytime, man. It was great talking with you.
All right. Talk soon.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
There's Rory Verrado with Extinction Rebellion. Fucking smart dude. A lot of important shit that we just went through right there. So I hope you enjoyed that. I have more to come. Right now, the live stream switches to just rumble.com/Lee Camp, but it's free to watch there. So if you want to keep watching, all you got to do is head over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Even if you aren't going to watch over there, I hope you'll still subscribe over there. And if you want to support my work, leecamp.net. I still got more coming. I'm not ending the show, but just letting you know all my stuff, including my latest Most Censored News, which I'm going to play that episode at the end of this live stream. I will play the new episode in case you haven't seen it. But all right, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Heading over there right now. And one more second.